Good morning and welcome back to the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Justin Stoddart. It's not often that I get the opportunity to say I have the world's foremost expert on a particular topic, especially one that is of utmost importance to the real estate industry right now, and that is one of productivity. I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest. Before I do that, let me remind you that inside of the Think Bigger Real Estate group on Facebook is where we go deeper on these topics. It's one thing for you to listen to what we have to say. It's another thing for you to engage, ask questions, and really become a part of the learning process. Back to today's guest. His name is Ari Meisel. He is a best-selling author, entrepreneur, CEO, Wharton School graduate. Ari, it's such a pleasure to have you here, my friend. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So for those that don't know Ari, he became most famous from his work on the art of less doing. In fact, I'll just direct everybody right now. If you're like, productivity is my thing, I need to learn more about productivity. You can go to lessdoing.com, and there is where you'll find access to learn more about the number of best-selling books that Ari has published and been a part of. And really, I'm curious, Ari, how did you get the title of being the world's most efficient man? That's pretty impressive, to say the least.
Yeah, that is from an article in greatest.com from, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. They did a feature on me, and they called me the most efficient man alive, and that stuck at the time. It was pretty big to lay that on me at the time, but I've tried my best to live up to that moniker.
I was going to say, once you heard that, I would imagine that you ramped up even your efficiency and productivity from that point. You had quite the label to live up to at that point. It's like, I better reevaluate all my systems again and just make sure that I can live up to such a lofty title.
Yeah, well, so the thing for me is that so much of what I mean, the basis of like everything that I've done had started with a fairly simple question, but it was presented to me in a very real situation. So I had been working in real estate in a big development project in upstate New York, and I was not living a very healthy lifestyle. I was in a lot of debt, a lot of stress. And when I was 23 years old, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness called Crohn's disease, which is considered to be incurable. That's what they say. And long story short, I was able to overcome the illness, and that's a whole other story. But I found myself in a situation where I'd been working these 18-hour days, and now I could only work maybe an hour a day if I was lucky, because I just didn't have the energy or the focus to do it. And the question of, what would you do if you only had an hour a day is fascinating to me, and it informs things that I do even today, because at that point, the question really isn't what would you do, it's what wouldn't you do? And if the things that you wouldn't do still needed to get done, then who or what is going to do them for you? So that extreme restriction on my time and resources is actually what led to the majority of what I teach and consult and coach on now. So, world's most efficient man, that might have been in line with it.
It's interesting when when I hear you say that. This past year, I think we all became much more aware of our own mortality, right? We saw, obviously, with the coronavirus pandemic stretching around the world, we realized how fragile humanity is. And I think it's a really interesting question for all of us to ask ourselves. If I had to go from 18 hours a day, if I had to go from 15 or 12 or 10, whatever hours a day, down to 1 or 2, what would that look like, right? That's what you were faced with. Hopefully nobody listening to this gets to that point where they're actually faced with that question. But what a powerful question, Ari, that all of us should maybe at least consider.
Well, this is what's interesting is, so you ask somebody that works a 9-to-5 job, you say, like, what would you do if you had to leave the office by 4, no matter what? And most of the time they're like, well, I just skip lunch. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, that works. But if you say to that same person, well, what if you only had an hour? It's this very puzzled look that they get in their face. It's very challenging because at that point it's hard to think, because it really gets you to think about what is it, that one thing that you're really best at, and then how do you deal with all the other things that still need to get done. So it requires a very, very different way of thinking than most people are used to. But also, I think that in general, restrictions are the key to better innovation and productivity. And I always like to give the example of MacGyver. I don't know if you were a MacGyver fan ever.
Absolutely. I just dated myself, but yes, 100%.
Okay. Yeah. So it's hard to tell. You look a lot younger than me. So I do have 4 children, which I think multiplies things. Nobody ever said to MacGyver, like, hey, there's a Home Depot across the street. Grab a shopping cart, get whatever you need, go across the street and blow up that building. right? It was always like, here's a paperclip and a box of Bisquick, go blow up the building. That when you have no other choice, you'll find a way. But what most people don't realize, and I think this is really the paradigm shift that's so important. I'm sure plenty of people listening right now are like running them 100 miles an hour. They're overwhelmed. They're working all the time. And they're probably saying to themselves, I just need more time. I wish I just had more time. I'm here to tell you that you probably have too much time and you're not using it correctly. And if you had less time, you would get more done. And I've seen it.
Fascinating. Right now, the audience that we're speaking to, whether, we've got a few people here live with us, most of our audience will tune in after the fact. Many of the people that we serve are in a real estate industry that has been going at a sprint pace for now a marathon distance. And that includes not just real estate agents themselves, but their teams, the lending industry and all the support that's offered there, the title and escrow industry and all the support that's offered there. There's an industry that's been kind of overheated now for a while. I'm not talking about the overall economy necessarily. I'm not making an economic statement. But what I am saying is that the pace at which these industries have been sprinting and the duration of that sprint is causing some burnout. I know somebody pretty close to me who just up and decided, I'm moving to Ecuador, gave her team, about 6 weeks notice. She was a massive producer and said, I'm done. I'm out. And the person that I've been grooming, I hope you're ready because I'm jumping. And so I think, that there's some situations like that where people are like, I'm done. Now, fortunately, she was in a spot where she could do that. A lot of people aren't, right? A lot of people aren't to the point to where I can just jump, pull the parachute and have a soft landing in Ecuador, right? A lot of people are like, I have to keep working, yet this pace is going to kill me or kill the parts about my life outside of business that are really important to me. What advice would you have to people that are faced with that kind of environment, that kind of a market where it's so competitive and also the getting so good that it's hard to actually slow it down or slow yourself down?
So this is the most common thing that I deal with because I have worked with thousands of individuals, hundreds of companies over the years, every industry you can think of. And I've certainly worked with the side hustle people, with the people that were startups, but my real focus is on entrepreneurs who have opportunity that exceeds their infrastructure, right? So these are successful entrepreneurs. They're making money. They're probably making a lot of money in many cases. They have a team, they have resources, but they can't manage the inflow, right? There's just too much, the flood is too heavy. So the problem in that situation, which is just a normal human thing, is that, as you said, the getting is good, right? And when the getting is good, you want to keep getting it. And we tend to end up focusing on that, the revenue generating activities. And that's when we start feeling like, and when I say we, I mean like founders, presidents, CEOs, whatever you want, that we're the rainmakers, right? Like we have to do the sales. We have to have the big meetings with the big clients. We have to lead the team forward. And we do have to do many of those things in some cases, but not in the traditional way that I think most people are used to, which ends up just taking a lot of time and not being done particularly effectively. So on the one hand, it's easy for me to sit here and say to you, like, look, you have to get off of the hamster wheel and start growing the business, working on the business versus working in the business, because otherwise you will burn out and eventually the well will dry up at some point and you won't have had the resources in place to deal with that. Not only that, what we often see in that case is that people are so focused on bringing in the business that they lose sight of servicing the business. And I can tell you from a lot of experience and seeing this over and over and over, you are a commodity. I don't care what you do, but there are thousands of other people that do exactly what you do. There are thousands of other people that do what I do, that are business coaches and consultants and whatnot. What ends up differentiating you is not just the results that you achieve for your clients, because again, a lot of people could probably do that. What differentiates you is the experience that people have with you. So there's two things that end up falling by the wayside as soon as people get busy: customer service or customer journey, and content creation, which might be related. It's the kind of thing where people, I don't need to put out content because we're just so busy right now. Like I can't deal with the flood I'm getting. And then customer service doesn't matter because oh, we're churning half of our customers, but we're replacing them with 75% or three-quarters of the customers every month. But that is a literal hamster wheel, and will not serve you in the long run. And I think that we need to get out of this mindset that that quantity is better than quality. And I'm not talking about dollars necessarily, and this is not a preachy kind of a thing, but it's just the facts. When we end up focusing on quantity and just doing more and getting more without any sort of end or rhyme or reason to it, and we don't ever stop to tune the systems, it will break at some point. And it could be tomorrow, it could be in a year from now, but no matter what, it is going to happen. And every one of you knows somebody who it's happened to, and it may have happened to you in a previous business. So for you to think that it's not going to happen again is very, very foolish. So we need to be carving out that time. We need to be saying no to opportunities if that's what is required for us to be able to focus on working the business. Because at the end of the day, you can make money in two ways: bringing in more revenue and cutting expenses. And I can tell you that cutting expenses and running more efficiently is a lot easier than bringing in more revenue constantly. It might feel good and feel exciting, but ultimately, your business doesn't need a firefighter. It needs a fireproofer.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, you're right. Everybody wants to be a firefighter. It's funny. I attended my son's kindergarten graduation years ago, and like everybody wanted to be a firefighter or a police officer, but nobody said they wanted to be a fireproofer. I don't remember one kid that they didn't even know what that means. Like that's not a profession that's like remotely interesting to anybody, probably young or old. But what you're saying is that that's actually what people ought to be doing with this excess of opportunity that's in front of them, is be pacing themselves to the point at least to where they can be investing on the side in infrastructure. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, absolutely.
Let's make a financial case for this. Let's say that the average real estate agent across the country brings home about $10,000 per closed transaction, right? That's probably on average, if you were to take it kind of a broad kind of swath across the country. And let's say that that takes them maybe 10 hours, right? So maybe I would say maybe 20 hours, okay? So maybe they're getting paid now this doesn't account for how long it takes them to get the transaction, but let's say it's 20 hours to close a transaction, okay? So they're getting paid about $500 per hour to close that deal. And oftentimes agents are like, I just can't slow down. Like the opportunity is too good. Meanwhile, the wheels on the car are shaking a little bit, right? The reason why I want to make this financial case is because I want real estate agents to really take into account what happens when they don't build the infrastructure, right? The opportunities that are being missed both now and in the future. So if you were to say, okay, once this crazy hot market cools off and your clients that didn't have a great experience are now not referring you, or they're using a different agent, right? How much is that costing you to now go replace that with a lot of time and effort to go generate new leads, paid leads from Zillow and other sources because your other clients are moving on without you? Like it'd be interesting to kind of put the numbers side by side, and maybe you can even share from kind of your experience, because I would imagine that making a case to the many businesses that you have consulted with and the entrepreneurs that you've consulted, they're saying like, Ari, I'd love to, man. I just can't now. Like there's too much good stuff going on. Any experience on that, or anything that you want to add to that as far as like, not specific numbers, but have you seen there actually kind of be a tip in the scales towards lost revenue in the future when they don't do what you're saying to do?
Yeah, 100%. We see it all the time, and that's the thing is, you said not necessarily specific numbers, but the specific number is bankrupt. Because you have these companies that are they're killing it, and then they grow and they grow and they sort of like outpace themselves, and they build a team and they hire more people, and all these things happen, and then they wonder why like there's no more clients at some point. And we're not talking to an audience here that's selling an info product that has global reach, or one of those quad lights that you screw into your basement that's motion sensing. It's $29.99. You can get 2 of them for $50. You know what? Like it's not a product per se. Like there is a limit to the geographical reach that any of you might be able to have. So there is a limit to the pool of customers that you might all be able to have. And not only that, you don't need thousands of customers. You don't necessarily need hundreds of customers to be doing lots and lots of business and to be doing the revenue that you want. So if your goal is just to, maybe the goal isn't necessarily just do more and more and more, but if your goal is just to sort of like strike while the iron's hot, there's still a limit to that. And I mean, not to be like euphemistic, but like you get burned because at some point it's just too much and you cannot support the success. So like, as I said, I deal with entrepreneurs who have opportunity that exceeds their infrastructure, a really key thing. Structure that might be in place to service the business that you bring in will not only lead to people not referring you, not coming back to you, people will leave you, you will have, knock on wood, but you will probably have lawsuits, like all sorts of things will happen that will put you in a much worse position than you ever were before. And it will happen. This is not a question. I'm not being pessimistic because you guys are doing great. Obviously, if you have business coming in, you're taking advantage of that. But it's the time now to actually be able to do the best you can by those clients. And I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of specific numbers, but I promise you that I have seen plenty of companies with 10 solid customers doing more profit and having more cash in the bank than ones with 100 or 500 even. Yeah. And I can also tell you from my business, which is not the real estate business now, I had a team. So I effectively shut down my business in October, not because of COVID. We were actually doing great with COVID. It was more of a shift in my priorities, I would say. And I have 24 private coaching clients right now and several dozen in a membership program. And I would say that I think I'm making about 80% more profit than I was before when I had a team and group coaching programs and all these other things, because there's just a mismatch there and you can't service what you've got coming in if you don't do it the right way.
Let's say that somebody that's listening to this, Ari, is saying to themselves, you know what, this is resonating with me. Like, I can't keep going at this pace, whether it be for my health's sake, whether it be for my relationship's sake, or whether it just be for my business's sake, my client experience and reputation and et cetera sake. What would be the first step that you'd recommend? Like, what's the first thing that people need to do if they're like, you're right, I need to spend some time working on my business and start to reinvest back into my infrastructure before all my roads and bridges are shot and I have no business, right? What's step one?
So the very first thing is to really take stock of how you're doing the things that you're doing right now. So what your processes look like, and you may not have documented processes at all, but start to examine, like, how am I signing on a new client? You know, what does that process look like? What does the customer journey look like? Is it a DocuSign? Is there an automated text message? Do I send a gift? Like, what do those kind of things look like? If it's just sort of a jumble of like, well, every time I kind of do this, I can do a little bit of that, that's a problem. And that's something to identify and work on. Because again, anybody can sell, you know, almost anybody on anything, but selling the right person and then servicing that business properly is really what will end up differentiating you. So really, my original framework is optimize, automate, outsource. So optimize is the first step, and optimizing is really about looking at, again, how we do what we do now, tracking, identification, how are we spending our time, how are we communicating, what does our schedule look like? And these may sound like really obvious things, but we just don't do them because you're so busy. You've got all these things going on, and you might look back and realize that you had like 8 calls in a row on a Tuesday, and maybe that was exciting, but you weren't able to get anything else done, and that was the reason. So starting to take control of the information that we have around us is a really big thing, because again, as I said before, firefighting is not what we need. Fireproofing is what we actually need. And it's a lot less sexy to fireproof than it is to firefight. We need to start putting those things in place that protect us from the emergencies. And the other one too, that I think is the most crucial, is to start to look at opportunities for asynchronous communication. It's the number one tool in the productivity arsenal. And that means things like voice messages, Voxer, WhatsApp, email is asynchronous, even though a lot of people don't treat it that way. So with asynchronous communication, you are communicating when you want to whoever, and they are receiving it when they want and responding in kind. So that means less Zoom calls, less meetings, shorter ones, less in-person stuff. Maybe that sounds antisocial, but what you end up doing is getting more control over your time. And I challenge people that there's things that you might think you can't do asynchronously because you have to sit at the table and shake the person's hand. It's just not true anymore.
Yeah, fascinating. What I hear you saying is that actually people need to start to build a process by actually having one. I think all too often, especially real estate agents that are very busy, they have kind of in their head, maybe they have a checklist, but that might even be to some like, oh, I've been meaning to do that. I've been meaning to get to that. But actually have you, I think I heard you say like list out or standardize and then optimize, right? Take a look at, okay, well, what happens when I have a new client? What happens when I have a client call? Like even if I send a GIF at the end of that in a text message, just putting that down somewhere, right? Because that then begins the opportunity for you to be able to make yourself replaceable at some point through automation, through outsourcing. Again, your newest book, which I'm fascinated and I haven't gotten my hands on, is Making Founders Replaceable. And I think there's somebody out there that would love to at least have the possibility of being replaceable, right? Kind of like we talked about at the beginning of this concept of what if you had to, what if you got diagnosed with a life-altering disease like you did, Ari, to where you had to change everything and only work for an hour a day? Or what if you just wanted to? What if you just wanted to move to another country and work remotely and have your team run it here? Like, it would be cool to have the option. Maybe you love what you do, but wouldn't it be nice just to know that your business is set up to where that could happen? And that's what I hear you saying, is that like write out what you do and then start to take a look at how could this be done better? Is that right? Kind of optimize that list?
Absolutely. And something that's a really important sort of differentiator for people to understand is that a lot of people become entrepreneurs because they want freedom. That's the big thing about being an entrepreneur. We have freedom. But what people have to understand is that there's two different kinds of freedom. It's something called the liberty paradox. So we have freedom from and freedom to. And freedom from is what most people actually have. So freedom from the 9 to 5, freedom from the grind, freedom from the bad partnership, whatever it might be. They're always looking for freedom from something. It's a negative liberty. They're trying to escape something to get freedom. But ultimately, what I want and what I help clients get is freedom to, the freedom to take on new things, and ultimately the freedom to leave if they so choose. And in their absence, the business will not crumble, it will continue to grow. And while they are leaving, they can explore and learn and discover and then come back if they want and bring those contributions back into the business. So freedom to is ultimately what we're trying to get to.
Wow, so powerful, Ari. I've never thought of it like that. But you're exactly right. It's funny. I had a conversation with my older brother, who's a dear friend of mine, and we were talking about getting our businesses to a point to where at some point we could go do service missions, right? We could go do other things. And that starts now, right? You don't just necessarily wake up one day and say, okay, I'm doing it. Like there's a process to start to think that way, whether it be through passive income and or through just creating a business, like you said, that gives you the freedom to go do those things. I love that concept. I haven't heard that, but you're right. It's interesting how many people get into the real estate industry because they want the freedom of, or freedom from a boss, a job, unlimited income, all these things. Then they get into the real estate industry and it's like, this is way harder than my boss was ever on me, right? And the income is sporadic at times. And all of a sudden the freedom that I thought I had from these things is actually, it's not that, right? But what you're saying is that if you got into the real estate industry under that premise to get freedom from these things, if you'll simply switch your paradigm to freedom to, then everything that you actually wanted getting into this industry can be yours again. Not just in your mind when you started, but for real.
Right. And ultimately the question is, do you want to run a business or do you want to own your own job?
Boy, that's powerful. Yeah, this concept of infrastructure. I read a quote, it might have even been yours, put out by a mentor and common friend of ours, Sharon, and in which he said, it's oftentimes not your goals that get in the way, but it's your systems that hold you back. It's funny, I do a lot of business planning with real estate agents, and many of them have very, very big goals. a smaller percentage of them achieve those goals. And I would say it's not necessarily because they don't have big enough goals. Like everybody has big goals, but it's the systems. And that's really kind of where you focus in and help people, right? Is to really identify that once you have the big goal, now you need to actually build the system to get you there.
Absolutely. Exactly. And also, people are rarely the answer to that problem, just so people understand. Like, you need to build systems and processes that replace what you do well before you start bringing on a lot of people.
Interesting. So hiring somebody, you're saying, isn't a cure-all.
No, you oftentimes makes it worse, actually, because if you try to take an inefficient problem and give it to somebody else who has less context, information, experience than you do, while at the same time expecting a result that was better than what you were achieving, you're setting everybody up for failure.
Interesting. Yeah, you're right. There seems to be this myth that I'm going to hire my next person, and less talk about I'm going to create this next system. Right? What advice would you give to somebody who is in that spot of like, well, nobody can do it as well as I can? Any thoughts around that? People like reluctant to either create the system with the intent that one day I'm going to be able to automate and outsource this. How do you get past that mindset?
There's so many people that can do it as well as you can, and probably better. It's like, that's the biggest thing. You have to accept that you're not that unique. That's a big part of becoming more replaceable, right? Because if you're unique, when I was in college, one of my professors always used to say something, which is like one of the few things that stuck with me, honestly. And he said, "Don't ever be irreplaceable, because if you can't be replaced, you can't be promoted."
Interesting. And when you own your own business, a promotion may look like more vacation time.
Yeah, new house, new spouse, whatever it is. Like, it's there's always another level to get to, and if you can't get out of this level, you can't go to that one.
You're right, because oftentimes solopreneurs, they oftentimes see themselves as like, I'm at the top, I'm the CEO, I'm the founder. But what you're saying is that promotion is actually improving your quality of life, potentially your profitability. And you can't have any of those things if, what was the determining factor? If you
can't be replaced. Okay. If you're irreplaceable, you're stuck.
That's not actually a badge of honor. That's actually a check mark against your business and you. Yeah.
And I mean, look, this is my form of promotion is, so I am a business coach. As you know, I've got a lot of books out there. I've done a lot of speaking. I consult, or I coach some very, very high level entrepreneurs around the world right now. If you were to ask my children what I do for work right now, they would tell you that I am an EMT and a woodworker. That's amazing to me. I couldn't be happier with that, because my wife turned to me the other day and she was like, are we doing okay with money? I was like, what? Yeah. What do you mean? She's like, I never see you work. I was like, yeah, no, we're good. I was like, and that's a pretty good compliment for what I teach. So. Yeah.
And you're a volunteer EMT. You love woodworking, and that's how your kids know you, right? Not sitting in front of your computer all the time, giving them a half, hold on. All right. We can all be guilty of that. Ari, this has been absolutely fascinating. I want to be respectful of your time and give you a deep sense of, I feel a deep sense of gratitude for you being willing to come and really serve this community. I want to ask you one last question, and it's this. You are a big thinker, right? That's why you're on the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. What does Ari Meisel do to continue to be a big thinker, to continue to grow, to continue to expand your possibilities? What does that look like for you?
I live a lot of life. So I have 4 children, 9, 8, and 5. I am a volunteer EMT, as I mentioned. I'm very, very involved with that. I worked a shift last night, overnight, actually. When I get off this call with you, I'm going to go install a ceiling fan and then build a bench for outside in my workshop. I have a lot of experiences all the time, and I'm currently getting my boating license and I'm getting my commercial driver's license just because I like attaining skills. So I'm never there's no Groundhog's Day for me. Every day is different. Every day is something new, and every opportunity, everything I do is an opportunity to learn something.
Fascinating that you can live that way, right? So many people, I think, they live for their career instead of having their career support their life. Right? Their life is their career, and what a beautiful vision you've painted for us about being, again, the father of 4 children, volunteer EMT, woodworking, and just going out and obtaining new skills and new habits. All the while, you've got a business in which you've got it automated, systematized in such a way that you can add big value to people without you having to spend and give away all of your precious hours to do it. So, Ari,
and just one thing on that, just to be clear with people, all of those experiences make me a better business coach and make me able to serve better, because I'm in new situations where I can figure out new things and apply those to the work that I already do. I can't tell you how many lessons I've learned from being an EMT that have translated to like multi-million-dollar business ideas for clients.
Yeah, many of them their businesses are in an ambulance, right? And you're, I can tell that there's some direct correlation. I can see it. So Ari, again, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on and being such a great contributor to me and to this community. Such a pleasure knowing you. Where can people find you if they're like, man, I need this guy in my life. I want to live the life that he's living, or a very successful business, yet also living a really, really good life. What does that look like? What's the best way to connect with you?
So they can find out everything about me at lessdoing.com. That's where the books, the coaching program, and all the podcasts, and all that stuff is. But if they want to get in touch with me directly, you can just go to voxwithari.com, which explains a little bit about the best way to communicate with me asynchronous. And it will be me. It will not be an assistant or an automation. It will actually be me that will communicate with you.
Yeah, I found that firsthand. Folks, that's a huge opportunity. voxwithari.com. And or lessdoing.com. I'll put those in the show notes here. I would encourage everybody to go take a look at what Ari's teaching here. He's become world famous for a reason. And it's something that you should look at. If you're looking at how can I get my life back? How can I get more hours in the day and really build a business that allows me to live the life that I want to live? This is a great place to go. I'm going to put also down here voxwithari.com for those that are interested in connecting directly with Ari. That's a great place to go. Ari, such a pleasure again. Thank you so much for being a part of this episode here today. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And my final request of everybody listening here today are 3 simple words, and they are go, think bigger. Ari, such a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you.